In Vienna is where the Congress of Vienna is happening. Boy, that was a weird long segue to talk about chocolate cake and coffee and quad bike racing. We're supposed to be talking about Napoleon. I apologize. Sorry. Let's go back. Napoleon abdicates 1814. And let's go to the map. Let me click on one sec here so I can see what you see. Okay, there we go. So Napoleon abdicates, gives up the throne, and he is exiled from the city, from France. He gets to keep the title of emperor. He gets to keep a retinue of soldiers. So he gets to keep about 1,000, 1,500 soldiers with him as his personal retinue. He gets to keep a salary. So in today's money, it's about $1 million a year salary he gets to keep. They treat Napoleon fairly generously, really, considering the fact that he has waged war against all of Europe for the better part of 15 years. But because and the reason why they do that, the reason why they're so generous with Napoleon is because they're trying to differentiate themselves from, and because they had fought against for so long, the ideas, the attitudes of the French Revolution. If they deposed Napoleon and killed him, if they treated Napoleon really, 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 really harshly and really badly, then what makes them any different from the French revolutionaries that killed Louis XVI and killed Marie Antoinette and so on? So in their mind, Napoleon is a legitimate emperor. He's a legitimate king. He deserves to be treated as part of that whole brotherhood of kings in a magnanimous way. So they exile Napoleon and they send him right there, okay? To this island right here off the coast of Italy called Elba, E-L-B-A, like elbow, but with an A. Elba is right there, just off the coast of France. And here, if you look at this through the Ligurian Sea, is the city of Toulon. Here's Nice, here's Monaco, here's Marseille. So he is not far. He is a short boat ride away from southern France. He's allowed to have parties. People come back and forth. He gets all kinds of mail. He gets a bunch of different things. So Napoleon is got a pretty sweet deal, except he's sitting on a postage stamp size island. You can't even see that island from where you are looking back at it. But that's where he is. He is exiled to there. And then the Congress of Vienna members get together and they have to try and figure out a whole raft of things that are problems as a result of the Napoleonic Wars and Napoleon's conquering of all of Europe. Let's see. I'm going to try and figure out this new configuration, see if I can present. Oh, there it is. Okay, so I'm going to present. Yeah, let's present the entire screen. There we go. All right. So looking at this, the Congress of Vienna's plan is to, like I said, try and reject Napoleonic War and try and reject warfare as a legitimate means of diplomatic negotiation, because it's been disastrous for the last, nearly 30 years. The Europeans have been at war with one another. Millions have died over the course of those years under fighting Napoleon and under the Napoleonic Empire and so on. So they explicitly try and reject all of that, and they want to go back to a brotherhood of nations, a sense that they, as a group, they can resolve problems without going to war. So in 1814, peace is declared. Napoleon is exiled. Importantly for us, Louis the 18th is placed on the French throne as a constitutional monarch. So what the Assembly of Nations essentially do is they say, let's just pretend that from 1792 on didn't happen. We're just going to, that's just a huge mulligan. We're going to go back and have a do-over, go back to 1792 with the Constitution that was brought in 1792 by Abbe Sieyès, originally before the Jacobins were elected into power, before the Girondins were brought into power, with Louis the 16th as a constitutional monarch. Let's reestablish a constitutional monarchy. Let's reestablish the French borders of 1792. So all the land that Napoleon had gained over years of warfare is all gone. The Germanic Confederation of the Rhine that's created, and the Kingdom of Italy that's created under Napoleon, the Warsaw, the Duchy of Warsaw, which is part of Poland today. All these things that Napoleon created are all gone. But this leads to a lot of problems in Europe. If we go here if we go, which map do I want to show you? Okay. I wonder if I can. Okay, I'm going to try something here, folks. This may or may not work. Again, my computer's really weird right now. Europe 1812 map. Let's see if I can find one here, the one I'm looking for. This will work. Okay, so in 1812, at the height of Napoleon's power, before Napoleon invades Russia in 1812, this is what Europe looks like. So it's all essentially controlled or allied with Napoleon Bonaparte. You see Prussia there in yellow. Whatever color that is, it looks like yellow to me. That's affiliated with and under the control of Napoleon. His brother is in charge of the Kingdom of Prussia, but they are allied. They are not conquered or controlled by Napoleon. All the blue is controlled by Napoleon. Austria is allied to him because Napoleon in 1808 or so divorces his wife, Empress Josephine, and marries the teenage princess of Austria. Maria Louisa, I think is her name, something like that, marries her. And the reason why he does that is because the Empress Josephine can no longer have children. She's too old. And Napoleon needs to have heirs to his throne. This is a very common theme for emperors and for kings and so on. Needs to have heirs to his throne. He also needs a military and economic and political alliance with another powerful family. So Napoleon, over here, marries the daughter of Joseph II of Austria, who is the brother of Marie Antoinette of Austria. So essentially, he marries Marie Antoinette's niece, 15-year-old Maria Louisa, and she then gives him a child, who then becomes the infant king of Rome. When he's 1 year of age, Napoleon declares him the king of Rome, so the king of Italy. Anyway, all of this is Napoleon's empire. But the interesting thing about this is, with Napoleon gone, then we have to look at what all of Europe will look like after Napoleon is gone. Because when we compare this map here, all of this is French. Now, after Napoleon's gone, we've got all of these countries that have risen up against Napoleon and become quasi-independent. So what do? How do we redraw the map of Europe? How do we fix the map of Europe? How do we solve all these political crises that are on there? Okay, so we've got these geographic boundaries of countries that they have to sort of work through. They have to figure out whether or not they make France pay reparations. They have to figure out whether or not France is allowed back in as a clear and independent member of this Brotherhood of Nations. They have to decide whether or not all these countries that have had the Napoleonic Code rammed down their throats at the point of a French bayonet, do they keep the Napoleonic Code, or do they roll back time and do they bring back serfdom? Do they bring back the Holy Roman Empire? Do they bring back all the power that the nobility had, and all the power that independent nobles, independent dukes and barons and earls and so on all had across Europe? Or do they maintain middle-class equality, maintain public education, maintain all of those things that the Napoleonic Empire brought with them? Do they allow the French to have a military? If so, how big should the military be? And can they trust the French, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? There's all kinds of issues that they have to try and work out as part of the Congress of Vienna. While all this is going on, Napoleon has been sitting on the island of Elba, cooling his heels, irritated, angry, and looking for something. I mean, yes, they let him remain emperor, and he has the title emperor, but he used it. Again, that used to be his empire, okay? And now he's sitting on a little tiny island that doesn't even make it on this map that's right here. I mean, Prince Edward Island is 4 times the size of Elba. So, and you can drive across Prince Edward Island in an hour and a half. So it gives you an idea that he goes from controlling all of Western Europe to nothing. He's like the Emperor of Cambridge. And I don't mean Cambridge is nothing, but I mean in terms of size relative to all of Europe. So Napoleon's been there. There is one major problem that is plaguing France while all the big European powers are meeting in Vienna. And the big issue is this: the average French citizen, who, don't forget, I mean, if you've got a person who is 50 years of age at this point right now, so a lot of your parents are hovering around, you know, the late 40s, early 50s. Your parents, had they been alive in 1814, that means that they were born back in the 1770s. They have lived through the entire French Revolution. They have lived through the fall of the French monarchy. They have lived through all the wars. They have lived through the rise of Napoleon Bonaparte. They have lived through France becoming the most powerful nation on the planet. And they have been given rights and property and freedoms and education and all kinds of things. So yes, there's been some horrible moments, cannibalism and beheadings and so on, horrible moments, but they have achieved a tremendous amount of things. They've got a tremendous amount of benefits from the Napoleonic period. So when the Congress of Vienna reinstates the Bourbon monarchy and says, let's just go back to 1792, there is genuine anger as part of the French citizenry about that whole idea. And Napoleon, let's not forget, Napoleon is not like Hitler in many ways. Napoleon had a secret police, and Napoleon, did oppress people in a lot of ways and so on. But there's been no Holocaust. There's been no mass murdering. There's been no huge arrests of people being thrown into prison and so on and so forth. Napoleon is not a dictatorial tyrant, not a totalitarian dictator in the same sense that Adolf Hitler is. So when he goes in 1814, he remains very, very, very popular with the French people, who are not happy that the Bourbon king is back. Now, Napoleon, who is sitting, don't forget, Napoleon is sitting over here on this little island, getting visitors that come over from France. All kinds of people come over there and meet him all the time. He is fully apprised of the situation in France and knows that the average French person is not happy with the government, knows that he remains incredibly, incredibly, incredibly popular. He knows that the Russians and the Prussians and the English and the Austrians have all got their attention focused on all these big issues that we just talked about: geographic boundaries and political issues and social rights for people and economic reparations and et cetera, et cetera. Their minds are not on Elba. They're not paying attention to what he's doing. They're focused on themselves. So Napoleon in 1815 realizes, if there's ever going to be a time for me to get off this little island and get back to France, it's now. So in coordination with various other people, because again, he's got messages going back and forth, Napoleon arranges for him to escape the island of Elba, and he returns back to the south of France at Marseille, in the south of France, right here, right? So right at the base where France comes down, and right near the Gulf of Lion, that's where he lands. He lands at Marseille. The Marseillaise, the French national anthem, comes from the name of that town, Marseille. Napoleon lands there. Now, when he lands in Marseille, there is a contingent of French troops that are there whose job it has been to guard the French coast against Napoleon coming back. So they're there with explicit orders that if Napoleon leaves the island of Elba and comes back to France, you are to shoot him or arrest him on sight, because he's not allowed to leave. He's allowed to be emperor. He's allowed to stay on the island, allowed to have visitors, but he cannot leave that island. Well, he does. He arrives. And there are lots of moments in history that did not happen. Marie Antoinette never said, let them eat cake. Galileo Galilei, when he was put on trial for his heliocentric view of the universe, never said under his breath, but it does move, talking about the earth around the sun. He never said that. All kinds of things, are ascribed to people that they never said. But here's a really cool moment. This actually did happen. Napoleon lands on the beach. This whole army of 1,000, 1,500 guys are all lined up in formation, guns leveled, pointed right at Napoleon. And Napoleon's got a retinue of soldiers that came over with him from the island of Elba, and they quickly, launch a formation and so on, and they stand there with their bayonets pointed at this other French army that's got their bayonets pointed at them, and you're into this whole standoff where it could get really nasty and really bloody really quick. Napoleon brushes past his own soldiers, stands in front of his soldiers, facing the bayonets of all these other soldiers that are there, undoes his greatcoat, his overcoat, to show his military uniform that he always wore, his general's uniform of the French state, opens it up and says, "I am your emperor. Shoot me if you will." Literally says that. Stands there facing down 1,000 guns and says, "If you want to shoot me, but I'm your emperor." And the French soldiers, the majority of whom have fought with Napoleon over the past number of years, the majority of whom rose up with him to power over all of Europe, sit there and go, "Yay, Napoleon's back!" And they all throw their hats in the air and they're like, "Vive le Napoleon, vive l'Empire!" And they are all excited. They all start singing the Marseillaise. Napoleon, after he has said to all of his troops, after he said that, says, "Let's go." And they start to march. Where are they going? Paris. That's where they're headed. He starts heading from Marseille up to Paris, and every town he goes through, there are soldiers that ride ahead of Napoleon on his way up, and he's going to go through the Loire Valley and so on and work his way up from Marseille to Paris. Today, there's a TGV train that goes straight from Paris to Marseille, essentially following the same route that Napoleon followed in 1815. Word spreads that Napoleon is coming. Word spreads that the emperor is back, that France is going, we're back, baby. And people flock to Napoleon's banner, and his army gets bigger, and it gets bigger, and it gets bigger. Now, they're all peasants. They're not real soldiers, but they join in because they want to be part of this. They're there. They're excited. Napoleon's back. Now, word reaches Louis XVIII in Paris that Napoleon's on his way back. Well, he flips because this is not good that Napoleon's coming, because he knows that he's not popular. He knows that nobody wants him in charge. He knows what happened the last time when his cousin was living at the Tuileries Palace. He knows that this is not going to be good for him. So what does he do? He summons the French military. The commander of the French military at that point in time is a cavalry officer whose last name is Ney. Seriously, cavalry officer. I mean, could he be of any other branch in the military other than the cavalry with a last name like Ney? Anyway, General Ney, it's funny, but it's true, N-E-Y. General Ney is summoned to the palace, and Louis XVIII says, "Listen, take however many troops you need. I need you to go and stop Napoleon." And General Ney says, "Majesty," takes 30,000 troops. 30,000. Now, Napoleon had 1,000, 1,500 real troops. His army is swelling with peasants, but it's not a real army. This is a massive show of strength to crush Napoleon as he's working his way up. General Ney takes 30,000 troops, cavalry and infantry, and they head off to intercept Napoleon. They meet somewhere around Limoges in the middle of France. They meet around there, and Napoleon is riding north. General Ney is riding south. You got this huge contingent of French soldiers coming down, Napoleon with his small army coming up, and they see each other in the distance. These two armies see each other in the distance. And Napoleon, who's astride a horse, he's riding a horse, goes riding forward in front of his troops. General Ney comes riding in front of his troops, comes all the way down. They meet as these two armies are starting to get together. And Napoleon, and again, this is literally true. Napoleon nods his head to General Ney, who, by the way, had fought with Napoleon since 1795. So these two have been comrades in arms for 20 years. What is Louis XVIII thinking, sending General Ney to Napoleon? Napoleon acknowledges General Ney with a head nod. General Ney takes off his hat and says, "Your Majesty." And Napoleon says, "À Paris." In other words, let's go to Paris. The entire 30,000 troops turn around and start heading back now towards Paris with Napoleon at the head of a massive army. Louis XVIII, what does he do? Listen, he's put back on the throne. He's there to rule. He's there to be in charge. He's there to take charge of the... He bolts. He's gone. He's out of there. He flees. He just bails because Napoleon's coming. Napoleon re-enters Paris. Paris is crazy for Napoleon. There's parades and ticker tape, and people are screaming the emperor's back. Napoleon rebuilds an army and now has to make a decision. What am I going to do here? Obviously, I've broken the law. I've broken the rules. I wasn't supposed to do what I did. Now I'm back in the Tuileries Palace where he had left a year earlier. I'm back here. What am I going to do? Napoleon comes up with a plan. And the plan is, I have to, if I can get the European powers to fear me again, not so much so that they're all going to gather against me, but to fear me enough that they'll leave me alone, then maybe I can stay Emperor of France. Keep in mind that when Napoleon fought over 60 pitched battles over his career, 60 battles, and he lost 2 of them. 2. Battle of Nations in 1813, and he lost the Battle of Waterloo at the very end of his career. He loses 2 battles out of 60. Napoleon is like, this is not rolling the dice in the same sense. We might sit there and think that's kind of a gamble to go on campaign again and to fight a war and to try and scare the Allies into leaving you alone. Napoleon is like, he's like the Floyd Mayweather of fighting. I mean, he's, 59-1 or 58-1 at this point in time. So his plan is to take his army of about 150,000 guys and to march off and have one battle, one key battle where he can knock 1 or 2 armies out and then try and negotiate a new peace with people. That's his plan. Meanwhile, Louis XVIII has fled Paris. Where has he gone? Vienna. So he goes to Vienna, where all the other emperors are there. Emperor Alexander of Russia is there. There's a representative of the English king, George III, who's there. And he comes running in going, Napoleon's back. And there are only 2 countries that have armies in the field nearby that can actually respond to this threat. The Russian army's all gone home after the wars. The Austrian army has disbanded. The Italians didn't have much of an army. The Spanish armies have all gone home. The Spanish aren't there anyway. There's only 2 countries. The English army under the Duke of Wellington is around, and they are in northern Austria at that point in time. And there is a Prussian army under General von Blücher, who is in the field that can respond to the threat. So Napoleon starts heading towards the Allies. So Napoleon is here in Paris, and he starts heading out towards northeastern Europe, trying to look for an enemy he can fight. Meanwhile, you've got the Duke of Wellington, who's down here. You've got the Marshal Blücher, who's up here. These 2 armies start to converge on Napoleon, and where they meet up is in Brussels at the Battle of Waterloo. So they're in Belgium. If you ever go to Brussels, and there's no real reason to go to Brussels. Belgium is a beautiful country. Brussels is boring. Brussels is kind of like if you were to come to Canada and go, what a beautiful country, let's go see Hamilton. I mean, it's got a weird, well, actually, there is a neat thing. If you ever want to feel like a giant, travel tip number 13. In Brussels, they've got a miniature village, like a miniature walkthrough thing where all of the greatest buildings in the world. So the Taj Mahal, I don't know, Empire State Building, the Great Pyramids of Egypt, they're all there, but they're on a much smaller scale. So the Taj Mahal stands about 5 feet high by about 5 feet wide and so on. So you can walk through this miniature park and see all these great things of the past, these great buildings. That's about all Belgium's got going for it. Brussels has got. Belgium's beautiful. Go there, get a waffle. Go to Bruges, get some lace, get some chocolate. Very good chocolate there. You can go on a tour of northwestern Belgium. Travel tip number 14. If you're ever there in Belgium, there's a tour company called Quasimodo Tours, like the Bell Ringer and the Hunchback of Notre Dame. Quasimodo Tours, it does tours of the Canadian battlefields for Canadians and Brits. So you can go to Ypres, you can go to where John McCrae wrote In Flanders Fields, you can go to Passchendaele and all that sort of stuff, see the Men in Gate. Great, it's an awesome tour. Go do that, go to Bruges. If you go to Brussels, the only reason why you go to Brussels is to see the Battle of Waterloo site. This is where the Duke of Wellington, Marshal Blücher, and Napoleon meet up in 1815. I'm going to link for you right now. I'm going to look it up here. Battle of Waterloo online game. There we go. Copy. Just gonna open this up. Okay, I'm going to put this on our. Let's go back here. Day 14. I'm going to link this for you. Some material. If you want to see. If you want to actually play through the Battle of Waterloo, I don't want to spend any more time on the actual battle itself. But what you can do is, it's kind of neat. There's all kinds of details about the Battle of Waterloo, what actually happened. This is from the BBC's website. What day are we at here? June the 8th. So post right now. Once I finish up, once I wrap up here in a minute, you can go online if you want. You can play the Battle of Waterloo game and just see exactly what happened during that battle. It's a choose your own adventure style game, the one I just linked for you. So what you're able to do is go through, and you can either play as the British or you can play as Napoleon. And you can try and win if you're Napoleon, or you can try and not lose the battle if you're the British. And it's a neat game, but it really does show you exactly how many things are going on when these battles actually take place. Regardless, let's focus on the actual history. Napoleon loses the Battle of Waterloo. Individually, he has got fewer soldiers than the Duke of Wellington and Marshal Blucher. Marshal Blucher's got 70,000. Duke of Wellington's got 120,000 or so. Napoleon's got about 150,000. So he outnumbers the Duke of Wellington, and he outnumbers Marshal Blucher separately, but he doesn't outnumber them collectively. So the reason why Napoleon strikes at Waterloo, even though it's not a great battlefield, it's not one that he would have actually chosen, not one that he wanted to fight at. And for his part, the Duke of Wellington didn't want to fight there either. It's not a great place to fight. At this point in time, you could choose battlefields. You would send emissaries back and forth and say, why don't we meet over there and fight on that particular field instead of this one? And things would work out, and you'd agree, let's meet tomorrow at sunrise and have the battle. That doesn't happen in 1815 in June. The Battle of Waterloo is set for Waterloo on this particular field. It's not an ideal spot for anybody. But as it turns out, Napoleon loses the battle. Now when Napoleon is exiled, now Napoleon loses. And keep in mind, where we started this conversation with Sacre-Torte and quad biking in Vienna, the Congress of Vienna is still going on. The representatives are still meeting there. There is a French representative, Talleyrand, is there at Vienna trying to negotiate for France. And all the other guys look at him and go, I thought that the French people were a little smarter than to actually throw their lot behind Napoleon again. Talleyrand's like, yeah, excuse me, apologizes for that and says, can we move forward from here? The Congress of Vienna agrees to move forward and continue with the plans, but they are not going to give Napoleon another chance. So the first time Napoleon was exiled, Napoleon was sent here, just off the coast, kept the title emperor, kept the salary, kept a retinue of soldiers. Now Napoleon is exiled to the island of St. Helena. The island of St. Helena, if I could draw it out for you, would be just outside my window. So it is in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. It is a windswept, craggy outcrop in the middle of the ocean, hit by storms and so on and so forth. Napoleon is exiled there in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. They build a big house there. They put a whole contingent of British soldiers on this island to guard Napoleon 24 hours a day. There are British warships that circle the island continuously, making sure that nobody comes anywhere near the island without permission. They're not taking any chances. Napoleon's not getting off this island again and coming back. Napoleon is exiled in 1815. Napoleon dies 1822, 7 years later, on the island. His body will remain there until 1850, when Napoleon III, who takes over after the revolutions of 1848 in France, when they get rid of the Bourbon monarchy and they bring back the Napoleonic Empire. Napoleon III is Napoleon's nephew, declares himself Napoleon III because the King of Rome, remember Napoleon's infant son, who became the King of Rome at one, he dies. No malfeasance, nobody kills him. He just, again, people die all the time for various reasons with no, medication and so on. He dies between 1810 when he's born and 1848 when Napoleon is put on the throne. Napoleon III is put on the throne. So Napoleon III, rather than taking the name Napoleon II, takes the name Napoleon III out of respect for Napoleon's infant son who died. Anyway, Napoleon's body in 1850 then is brought back from the island of St. Helena, where it's been interred. And Napoleon III, who is the one who builds the Champs-Élysées, Napoleon III is the one who builds the Arc de Triomphe for out of respect for his predecessors' military triumphs. He is the one that reshapes all of Europe. Have you ever seen reshapes all of Paris? Have you ever seen the way that Paris looks? The Arc de Triomphe is at one end of the Champs-Élysées. The Place de la Concorde is at the other end of the Champs-Élysées. It looks like a big barbell, like a cartoon barbell. And around these big circles, where the Arc de Triomphe is on one side and the Place de la Concorde is on the other, Napoleon III bulldozes all of downtown Paris and rebuilds it like spokes coming off a wheel, which is why if you ever see like an overhead shot of Paris, look that up, an overhead shot of Paris, a cityscape, what you'll see is all these, angled streets going all off. It's all these parks are built and so on. Napoleon III is the one who builds Paris the way it looks today. If Louis XIV were to be alive today and were to be dropped in downtown Paris, he wouldn't recognize any of it, because it's all, with the exception of the Tuileries Palace, with the exception of Les Invalides, with the exception of the Louvre, most of downtown Paris is bulldozed and rebuilt in the 1850s under Napoleon III. His sarcophagus is there at Les Invalides, worth going to see. It's a neat thing to see if you're ever in France. And so Napoleon dies 1822, exiled. Let's go back to the Congress of Vienna system. What does the Congress actually agree to do? Well, the Congress of Vienna, and I'm going to, I'll post this for you in a second, but the Congress of Vienna comes up with a number of key resolutions. All right. Here are the key resolutions. Let me go back here. Let me go back to present the entire screen. Click, share. Okay, so here are the main resolutions of the Congress of Vienna. And I've highlighted the most important ones for you here. And these are going to be important for the next 100 years of European development. A number of different things happen that are really, really key. First, Prussia, which is the nucleus of what will become Germany. Prussia is given lands on the western side of the German Confederation. I'm going to show you a map in a second so you'll see what I mean. So Prussia is given territory. Let's go here. No, let's go to, yeah. Let's see if I can make this bigger. There we go. Okay. So here's Prussia. Okay, this is after the Congress of Vienna. Here's Prussia. Prussia is given territories here on the western side of all these independent Germanic states. So this whole area here becomes known as the Germanic Confederation. All these states, Bavaria, Württemberg, Saxony, and so on and so forth. Prussia gets these territories here. Now, this is one of those situations where Prussia has deservedly played an important role in defeating Napoleon and deserves some territory. So the weakest of the territories are given, of the Germanic Confederation, are given to the Prussians. However, what this means is Prussia, who has the strongest military on the planet at that point in time, Prussia sends some of its soldiers and garrisons them here on the opposite side of all these independent Germanic states. Well, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out what's going to happen to all these little independent states here if these parts of Prussia and this part of Prussia want to coalesce in the middle, which is exactly what they do between the 1850s and 1870. Prussia declares war on these states here and declares war on Austria here, and Prussia by 1870 will create Germany here in this northern part of Europe. So the Congress of Vienna, going back here, the Congress of Vienna, by giving Westphalia and the Rhine provinces to Prussia, sets in motion the unification of Germany, which is going to play, as you know, an important role in the 20th century, especially in the first 50 years. Germany is going to play a major, major, major role. On top of that, this is the beginning of the British Empire, where the sun never sets on the British Empire and so on. All of France's overseas territories are lost to Great Britain as part of the Congress of Vienna. Britain has fought Napoleon for the entire time since 1792. They deserve to get the most. So as a result, Britain gets the vast majority of France's overseas colonies, and Britain is acknowledged by the other European powers as the untrammeled, unqualified masters of all of the oceans. So the entire world's oceans now become Britain's plaything. And Britain takes its navy, which has been fighting against Napoleon all this time, and unleashes it on the rest of the world. And by the time we get to the 1870s, Great Britain will control 1/4 of the Earth's land surface. Fully 1/4 of all the people alive on the planet in 1870 will wake up and go to bed under the British flag. And this is why by 1870, the saying is that the sun will never set on the British Empire. As it tracks across the entire globe, somewhere out there, Britain controls the land. On top of that, Austria is given back a lot of the territory it lost during the war, but let's go back to our map here again. Austria is also given these territories right here in the northern part of Italy. Okay, so this was the Kingdom of Italy under Napoleon. Let's look at the European map here, right? So this is all Italy under Napoleon. This Kingdom of Italy chunk, where Napoleon's infant son was in charge, this Kingdom of Italy chunk, if you look at that map, okay, so here's Austria. Austria will not get Bavaria. These territories here will become independent. Prussia will get Westphalia. Austria will get these territories here. Let's go to the map. See, Bavaria is still independent, but Austria gets all of this territory here. And this is going to be problematic for the Italian people because Napoleon has really emphasized nationalism based on languages. Remember, we talked about that. He organizes Europe into these various states he organizes Europe into these various states so he can control them linguistically. So all the Italians are grouped together, all the Swiss are grouped together, etc., based on their language. Well, there is increasing French Italian nationalism for the very first time in Italian history since the fall of the Roman Empire in 500. All of the Italian states were amalgamated together. And all the documents, all the laws were in their local language, and they had a common identity as Italians, as an Italian nation. Remember, Abbé Sieyès, what is the third estate, talks about nation. Nationalism really is rising in Italy. The fact that Austria gets those key territories, including the most important port in all of Southern Europe, which is Venice, is going to be a bone for contention. And that will set in motion the Italian unification, which will also be completed by 1870. So Prussia will take over all of Northern Europe and create Germany by 1870. The Italians will will take over all of this area and create the Italian state in 1870 as well. So those two things get set in motion. Switzerland, by the way, after the Congress of Vienna, is recognized once again as perpetually neutral. It was amalgamated under Napoleon. It had been first acknowledged as neutral in 1648 after the 30 Years' War. The Congress of Vienna reiterates Swiss neutrality, and so that's why Switzerland is independent again. Switzerland will never again be involved in a war after the Napoleonic Wars, and they remain there. Going back here, the key thing here, okay, is after 1815, you now have a new balance of power in Europe. The new balance of power is between these five major European powers: Russia, which controls Poland, Russia, Austria, Prussia, England, and France. The two biggest, obviously, are Britain, because of the empire, and Russia, because of their sheer size, going all the way over the Pacific Ocean. The Europeans make one final decision at the Congress of Vienna, and that's this: they will no longer resort to fighting one another if they have a problem, if they have an issue with one another. What they agree, and this is what we could call a nascent League of Nations or a nascent United Nations, okay, an embryonic United Nations. These five powers, Russia, Prussia, Austria, England, France, agree that if there's any conflict between two of them, so let's say that Prussia and Austria, that share a common border, had a conflict. Well, rather than Prussia and Austria going to war, what Prussia and Austria agree to do is go to Vienna and plead their case before the other three members of the Congress of Vienna. Remember, there's five: right? Russia, Prussia, England, Austria, France. 5 parties. So let's say 2 of them are fighting with each other. So now we got 2 over here that are fighting. We got 3 powers left. So we had Russia and Austria and Prussia that are arguing with each other. So England, France, and Russia will agree. They'll act as judges and juries as a triumvirate. Those 3 will sit together and they will say, all right, well, who do we side with? Who do we agree with? And stroke their beards and cluck their tongues. And they will decide a resolution to the problem. Prussia and Austria, for their part, will agree to abide by the resolution, and warfare, therefore, no longer needs to be the result of European conflict. They can negotiate and resolve their issues. And the Congress of Vienna system works beautifully, avoids a major European war between those 5 powers from 1815 until 1914. And the main reason why a war breaks out in 1914, and it doesn't just happen because the Archduke gets assassinated in 1914. There are long-term causes of the First World War, which we'll talk about in a few days. Most importantly, the reason why the First World War happens is the unification of Italy in 1870. Not so much the unification of Germany, because Prussia was already a member of the great powers, but the unification of Italy in 1870 changes the balance of power in Europe. So in 1870, Italy is welcomed into the League of Nations, welcomed into the great power system, Congress of Vienna system. So now you got Russia, Prussia, Russia, Germany, Austria, England, France, Italy. Well, that's a problem now, because the Congress of Vienna system is based on 2 powers, let's say Germany and Austria, having a problem. Well, the other 3 powers will come to a resolution. You can never have a tie with 3 powers, right? It's always going to be 3-0 or 2-1 or 1-2, right? You'll always have that. You'll never have a tie. Problem is now, Germany and Austria have a problem. There's now 4 other great powers, which means theoretically you could have Italy and France on one side, England and Russia on the other side. Now what do? The Congress of Vienna is tied. Well, what this leads to then is backdoor alliances, backdoor deals between all the powers on the Congress of Vienna system. They all begin to sort of make side deals and negotiations and secret contracts and so on. And if you remember back to grade 10, there were a number of causes of the First World War. Militarism, nationalism, imperialism are causes of the war. But one of the other causes of the war was the alliance system. The alliance systems that caused World War I in 1914 start being built in 1870 after our 5-power system becomes a 6-power system. And you have to somehow avoid a tie between the 4 that are sitting in arbitration. Okay, so we're jumping ahead in our narrative to World War I, but I just want to connect those things together. Congress of Vienna system, very, very important, wraps up the Napoleonic Wars, wraps up the wars of the French Revolution, starts Europe on its path towards imperialism, starts Europe on its path towards the Industrial Revolution, starts Europe on its path towards the rise of Germany, the rise of Italy, and ultimately will start Europe on its path towards the First World War. Okay?